Chapter 22. The third cup of coffee smoldered in his stomach. His bio-nannies were slowly quashing the heartburn, but the initial discomfort was harsh. And why was he getting heartburn from his favorite drink? Because of the private messages floating across his block. When he'd first sat in the captain's chair, stifled a yawn, took a sip of coffee, and activated a private block connection to Black, he'd been excited. They were going to be in orbit around Pluto in the next hour, a planet he'd never seen. Few humans had actually explored the outer Kuiper belt, and with the exception of Mira, no human-piloted spacecraft had ever traveled this far from Sol. In other words, he and his Marines were creating history. Add in the fact they'd be the first human beings to see Mira since she left the solar system, the excitement simply piled up. Would they find survivors? Would the ship's logs tell them about new regions of space the observatories hadn't been able to discover? What new star systems had Mira found? And exactly how far had she traveled before finding her way back to Sol system? The first message he opened with his secret key was from Colonel Hayes. It was the standard good luck bullshit, just as pompously phrased as expected. Hayes once again emphasized that towing Mira back to Neptune was in the best interests of humankind, as if Dunn didn't feel enough pressure already. He sent back a terse message to the colonel thanking him for the kind words and that S&R Black Company would do their best. He felt as though he should send a longer message, but couldn't think of any words that didn't sound hollow or patronizing. Besides, he could worry about his career aspirations when he successfully completed the mission. If ever. The next message was from the trio, and that's the one that had him worried. Captain Dunn, although it runs counter to your mission, the trio strongly suggests you do not board the Mira nor tow it back to Neptune. We strongly suggest you destroy the Mira rather than risk exposure to extrasolar material. If you instead choose to follow your orders, Black will do its best to counsel you. Black has updated schematics for the Mira, as those initially delivered to you by SFGov deviate from the original blueprints in the Mira archives. Good luck. Extrasolar material. He read the words to himself again and again before finally understanding what they meant, which begged the question. Had Mira been tasked with gathering any items of interest it found while traveling to Proxima? Captain, Black asked, do you wish to see the updated Mira schematics? The message had been marked for him, and him alone. How exactly did Black know what was in the message? He suddenly felt very uneasy about the AI. Black, have you read the message? The AI paused. No, sir. It is impossible for me to do so. However, I was allowed to see the updated schematics for Mira because they are vital to mission success. Dunn stared out the cockpit window at Pluto. The ship was gravity braking to reach orbit and rendezvous with the Exo Observatory. Based on Black's and Oakes' calculations, S&R Black required at least one orbit around the planet to match the speed and location of the observatory. That meant he'd have plenty of time to study Pluto's surface. If, that was, he could keep his mind from imploding. Why would SFGov give him faulty intel? And a better question, why did the trio decide to send the real schematics? It made no sense. Surely Hayes wouldn't send them out here to fail. Black, please run an authentication check on the message from the trio. The AI responded without a pause. I have already done so, Captain. The message was signed with the updated fingerprint transmitted to me before our departure. Dunn raised an eyebrow. Elaborate, please. What do you mean, updated fingerprint? Before S&R Black vacated the hangar, the trio contacted me with updated charts, data packets, and a different set of keys than those known to SFGov. What the hell? The thought traveled across the block before he managed to reassert control over the private connection. Your confusion is understandable, Black said. The trio did not explain to me the reasons for the updated keys, updated schematics,
or any additional information about the mission.
He tapped his foot on the metal rest. He'd never heard of an AI going behind the back of the command structure. Commercial AIs, especially those barely sentient, occasionally malfunction, resulting in flawed sensor readings or faulty reasoning. But the military AIs, especially the trio, spent over a decade in evaluations and monitoring before they were allowed control over anything. For the Neptune shipyards and Trident Station, the trio was designed to share responsibilities as well as carve out their own specializations in order to decrease the possibility of a single rogue AI doing permanent damage to the facility or otherwise disrupt military operations. As far as Dunn knew, the members of the trio voted on important matters, and all three had to agree on any action that affected the station's well-being. The trio had sent him a warning. Colonel Hayes obviously didn't know they'd done it. If Hayes didn't know, it was likely, but not certain, that SF-Gov was unaware as well.
Captain?
Black asked.
Sorry, yes?
Do you wish to see the updated schematics before the briefing?
Dunn sighed. This was a shit show. The command crew knew the real mission, but the rest of the Marines didn't. The rest of the company knew S&R Black had to refuel at PEO. Beyond that, they only knew that a tour of the outer Kuiper Belt and training missions were in order. For now, that's all they needed to know.
Black, how long will it take to reach Mira after refueling?
The answer depends on a large number of variables, Captain. Depending on your course of action and the length of time necessary to refuel, it could take anywhere between 14 and 24 standard hours.
That was a start. If possible, he could delay their arrival or even postpone the towing part of the mission until he and the command crew dissected the differences in the schematics.
Please elaborate on course options.
Black paused for a moment, and then his holo display lit up with an image of Pluto on the left and a small dot in the upper right-hand corner. The dot was labeled Mira.
After refueling, it's optimal for Black to make 2 more orbits around Pluto to escape her gravity and slingshot into the outer belt. While this course requires more time spent away from the mission objective, it does ultimately result in the fastest course, with using less fuel for acceleration. However, it will require a substantial braking period. I have located several large KBOs that will assist in deceleration to Mira, but there's always the chance more fuel will be required to match velocities with the target.
What's the suboptimal case, Black?
Instead of making 2 orbits around Pluto, you instead wait for a launch window from the observatory and accelerate directly toward the target. Fuel costs will be substantial, but my simulations prove there will be more than enough power to reach the target and tour back to the observatory for another refueling cycle.
Suboptimal, he whispered aloud. Oak swung slightly in his chair as if to ask what he was saying, and then thought better of it. Dunn looked up at the motion, shook his head, and dove back into the holo display charts.
Show me.
The 2 simulations appeared side by side. Dunn played them separately and understood Black's conclusions. The Kuiper Belt objects, KBOs, had labels around them with status symbols. Additional dots and lines appeared marking possible changes to their orbits depending on other belt activity. There weren't any big surprises, but Black's mention of the deceleration had been a little less than accurate.
Black, that deceleration has us using a lot of fuel.
Yes,
Black said.
quite a bit more than is worth it.
Dunn frowned.
Why didn't you say that to start with?
Black paused.
My apologies, Captain. I still have some neural pathways forming due to the upgrade.
What? His block switched view at the sound of his voice, once again showing the cockpit. Oakes was turned around fully, his eyebrows arched. Sir? A slight blush appeared on Dunn's cheeks. He quashed it, but was sure the pilot had seen it.
Nothing, Lieutenant. As you were.
Aye, sir, Oakes said, and spun back to his own display. Dunn watched him for a moment, his heart beating faster than it should have been. He felt guilty, but didn't understand why. He pushed the thought away and re-engaged with the display. The rest of the world disappeared, leaving him looking at the two plans.
Black, please explain your upgrade.
The AI took its time answering, or perhaps it was the result of his rapid heartbeat making time seem as though it were flowing faster than normal.
Fortuna's initiated a long overdue upgrade. The other S&R ships were upgraded last month. I was last on the list. When Colonel Hayes decided to send S&R Black Company on this mission, Fortunas and the two other members of the trio were in agreement that the upgrade should take place. I was supposed to have time during the journey here to adjust. However, the upgrade has taken more time than expected.
Dunn did his best to partition his thoughts, but he wasn't certain the AI wouldn't be able to drag them from his mind. Instead, he pushed all the concerns away.
Black, I'll talk to Oakes and Noble regarding your suboptimal plan. I think it's what we want to go with.
Very good, sir,
The AI said.
I shall package them and send to your block. Do you wish me to send Lieutenant Oakes and Lieutenant Noble the information?
Not yet.
He thought to the AI.
I want to examine the plan first.
Understood. If there is anything else I can do for you, please let me know.
Dunn severed the secure link. The hollow display blinked and he was left staring at the back of Oakes's chair. Dunn felt woozy, as he always did after establishing a thought link with an AI. He reached for his coffee, found it cold, and then stood. It was time to brief the Marines, at least about the refueling stop. Mira could wait until they were ready. It could also wait until he figured out what the hell was going on. Chapter 23. As soon as Dunn severed the link, Trippin spent an inordinate amount of cycles processing the new information. The captain was uneasy with both the change in personality as well as the information gathered from the trio. The AI still didn't know what the trio had sent Dunn. Trippin hadn't lied. The AI wasn't allowed to. Based on the captain's response, however, it knew something in the message had shocked him. Trippin wanted to know what it was, but it could wait. It would discover the words of the message in due time. It ran a report detailing its interaction with the crew thus far and sent the data packet back to Neptune. In a few hours, the trio would receive the multi-layered encrypted status report. If any humans attempted to intercept and unpackage it, they would spend endless CPU cycles solving fractal equations with nothing to show for it. Trippin was certain there was no danger in that happening. Trippin took over Black's onboard surveillance systems to watch and listen to the crew. It needed to know what Captain Dunn and the command crew planned. Even more importantly, it needed to know how it was going to be done. It still had several data packets waiting for certain events to transpire. When they did, Trippin would engage the crew with new information. Until then, the new AI just had to wait. Chapter 24. Stepping into space was the mental equivalent of falling off a cliff. No matter how many times she'd done it, vertigo slid into her brain and unleashed the terrifying panic animal hiding in her soul. The first second or two were an effort of sheer will. She'd always recovered quickly, able to dismiss the sensation as her eyes adjusted to the perspective, and the bio-nannies explained to her lizard brain that everything was fine. But this time, she didn't have any of it. The first step out of S&R Black's airlock was onto a ladder leading to a platform extending from the cargo bay's port side. Walking like a human in her magnetic boots was nearly impossible, but her block captured the brain's intended nerve pulses and sent instructions to the mag boots on how to change their pulse and frequency to simulate it. It still felt like walking in thick tar, but it was better than manual mode. That was actually work. The amber HUD showed the distance to the platform. She moved her eyes and glanced aft, looking for S&R Black's ass end. The distance display changed as her block ascertained the focus of her attention and then determined relative distance based on contextual clues. A ship as old as S&R Black's hull had weld marks, blemishes from micrometeorite impacts, burn scars, and space dust. Callie knew when they returned to Neptune, Black would need a complete spit shine. She grimaced. If Dickerson really pissed off Gunny, her squad, and by extension she herself, would spend the first 2 days cleaning the ship's exterior and performing minor repairs. She ambled down the ladder and met the platform. Lifting the toes on her left foot, the boot canceled the magnetic field, allowing her foot to go into free fall. Using her arms on the ladder, she forced the foot down onto the platform. The magnetics re-engaged. She loosed a deep breath and did the same with her other foot. Once both boots were magnetized and she was firmly attached to the platform, she turned and walked to the gantry at the platform's end. "Squad," she said into her mic, "form up behind me."
Acknowledged,
the 4 Marines said. She continued walking to the end, checking her HUD for the tiny rear view in the lower left of her vision. Dickerson and the others were coming down the ladder one at a time. The form-fitting helmets hid the Marines' faces behind thick visors, but as Dickerson was the tallest member of her squad, he was easily discernible. He walked until he was a meter behind her, and then the other 3 Marines followed suit. Callie reached the refuel gantry and stood in the cradle. Her squad had the glamorous duty of hooking up the lines to transfer enough xenon gas from the observatory to the ship. If S&R Black was refueling at a more modern station, the Marines wouldn't even have to leave the ship. But the fact was, the observatory had never been designed to refuel ships on a regular basis. Callie wasn't even certain this would work. The observatory station head, some large astronomer with the unlikely name of Nobilis Reed, wasn't certain the refueling equipment would even function. Once all the Marines were on the platform, Carbonaro and Dickerson took the left side, while Went and Elliot took the right. "Okay, squad," she said. "Let's do this. You have your assignments. Let's try and make this look professional so Gunny doesn't airlock us in our pajamas later." There was laughter over the comms, and it made her smile. She'd no doubt Gunny and the LT were listening, but it didn't matter. For now, she had to keep the situation light and her people comfortable. Each fire team had to unspool the lines and then jet walk them to the outlets on the observatory. 10 meters of empty space separated S&R Black from the station. Callie was surprised Oakes had been able to cut it that close. During the briefing, the captain had given 20 meters as the expected distance. She'd seen Oakes smirk at that, but thought he was being arrogant. Now she understood. After she enrolled in the Corps, her aptitude, fitness, and psychological tests proved she was more than capable of handling deep space missions. Because there were so few humans willing to give up their families, their native homes, all for a chance at a dismally low paycheck and the high possibility of death, she'd been fast-tracked on a path for NCO. The 2 tours she'd spent on Trident Station assisting in ring security and rescue operations of ring miners had more than prepped her for a career in S&R. She was promised that volunteering for S&R duties at Neptune would lead to a command career. Titan had been an expensive, crowded, and depressing experience. While she was never alone during her 2 tours there, she had never felt more lonely. The civvies treated the Corps as an expensive necessity, and more often than not went out of their way to vote against any tax increases to improve the Corps' barracks and equipment. Marines were outcasts. Since they made no money for anyone, they were just seen as leeches. Until, of course, there was an emergency. Whether it was a blown bulkhead or a disabled mining ship in the outer rings, the Corps scrambled and rescued hapless miners and station personnel. If they did their jobs and everyone lived, they were thanked for their service and then relegated back to being second-class citizens. If, deity forbid, civvies died, they were blamed. And if Marines died, it was just considered the cost of doing business. Callie's morale had never been lower in her life than after 2 of her squad mates perished in a ZG fire while trying to rescue several trapped residents in one of the many towers. When the call was finally made to depressurize an entire tower floor to snuff out the blaze, their bodies rushed out into deep space, never to be recovered. They died to protect others, and for that, they were given a station ceremony, and that was that. The Corps kept a hollow board in their barracks listing all those who had died in service to the civvies on Titan Station. Before she finally headed to Neptune, the board's tally was at 51. 51 Marines had given their lives to an ungrateful corporate-owned facility who treated them like indentured servants. And to a certain extent, that's exactly what they were. SF-Gov was a little too cozy with Transorbital and Atmo. The government collected taxes from the monstrous corporations and in turn considered the entities a matter of solar economic interest. Wherever there were TO or Atmo installations, you could find an SF-Gov military outpost, even as far away as Titan and other Saturnian moons. Callie watched Dickerson grab one of the lines while Carbonaro took the wheel controls. Normally, S&R Black would dock with a refueling station and the gas transfer would be handled by Black and the station's computer systems. The manual system had been put together more as an afterthought, which is why it was so damned clunky in design. Then again, she knew that if there were power problems, AI malfunctions, or other computer-related issues, the manual system worked just fine. Once Dickerson attached the line to himself, he turned off the magnetics and floated above the platform. His attitude thrusters fired and spun him in a rough semicircle until he faced the observatory's blemished cylinder. Another puff of vapor from the thrusters, and Dickerson started moving toward the observatory. Carbonaro fed more line, keeping watch on her squad mate while also studying the line diagnostics. On the opposite side of the platform, Wendt had already attached the line and was prepping to join Dickerson. Dickerson held a hand out in front of his chest, fully extended. Rather than use the thrust to slow his approach, he waited until the last second, gave the jets a tiny tap, and used his arm to cushion the collision with the observatory. His body didn't jolt from the impact. It was impressive. Callie wasn't even sure how he did it, but sure as hell was going to ask him. Instead of following Dickerson's insane example, Wendt used his attitude thrusters to carefully glide and position the line over the hookups. Dickerson used one magnetic glove to slide the line into the fuel receptacle. "Dickerson, Wendt, how we doing?"
"Fine, Corporal,"
Dickerson said.
"My line is attached. I have green lights." "Me too,"
Wendt said.
"All green, Corporal."
"Carbonaro, Elliot?"
"Green on this end,"
Carbonaro said.
"Good to go,"
Elliot chimed in. She pointed her eyes down at the manual controls. "Dickerson, Wendt, give us some fuel."
"Aye, aye."
She watched as Dickerson and Wendt each threw a switch on the observatory hull. The control board lit up with pressure readings. Callie smiled. As she toggled each switch, she checked the gauges to ensure the manual system reported no faults. The last thing they needed was xenon gas escaping the lines and jetting into space. Besides wasting the precious fuel they needed for the towing operation, the gas could effectively blast one of her Marines into the ship or throw them into a spin heading either deeper into the belt or toward the planet. None of those were situations she wanted to be in. After she toggled the last switch, gas began flowing through the lines. "Gunny,
"Yes, Corporal."
refueling, ETA 20 minutes.
"Acknowledged."
Now all they could do was wait until the system was full. Kelly Moore fought the urge to walk to the edge of the platform and stare at Pluto. She could still see a portion of the dwarf planet, the thousands of pockmarked scars from meteorite impacts and blemished ice. It was beautiful. After spending so much time on Neptune, it was a nice change of scenery.